Carson. Welcome back to the Rebel Tech Podcast. I feel like I have to introduce myself this time because our film producer said I look like Rachel Maddow. So we're just going to start from the top and make this all about looks. And, you know, if we had an award for best dressed guest, I'm not allowed to give it because we can't play favorites. But your jacket as an inanimate object would win it. So I'm glad to see the jacket and you on the podcast.
Me in the jacket would win it. But listen, I can't take credit for this. The saleswoman at Men's Warehouse, she saw me coming. I went with something different. She pointed this out. I'm glad she did it because I don't have the competency to dress myself like this. But it does look great, and I appreciate all the compliments. I wear it just for you at this point.
Well, thank you. I was going to say this is what the better halves and better salespeople are for, but apparently this is me. So, wow. Well, what an intro. Well, Carson, welcome back to the Rebel Tech Podcast. Longtime listeners know that you've been on before to talk about energy, and we started to get into nuclear and artificial intelligence and data centers. Their tech moves fast. A lot has happened in energy in the last couple of weeks, not even months here. And I want to start with a quotation, and I could quiz you and ask who you think said this, but I think you're going to know. From a report that came out about a week ago, just over a week ago, the top line quotation: Texas is the energy capital of the world, and we are ready to be #1 in advanced nuclear power. Who said it?
Best governor there is. That's Governor Greg Abbott.
That's right. That. So I'm not going to read the entirety of the press release here, but Governor Abbott was commenting on the tales of a big publication that's getting a lot of excitement, not just in the energy landscape, but in AI data centers. What's Governor Abbott referencing? What does this mean for the state of Texas?
Well, you surely recall, I think we mentioned it last time I was on, that I think August or September of last year, there was an event with X Energy at UT. Governor Abbott was there, as well as a representative from UT and X Energy and Dow Chemical to talk about their nuclear project they have going on.
That's the one in Seadrift.
Yep. That's right. And that day is when Governor Abbott commissioned this report. He called for Commissioner Kathleen Jackson at the Public Utility Commission to put together a advanced nuclear working group. And that was led by Commissioner Jimmy Glotfelty. And the membership there was lots of industry experts, higher education experts, looking at where does Texas stand right now when it comes to nuclear energy? How can we pave the way to be the leader in nuclear energy? We're already, like the governor said, we're the world capital of energy right here in Texas. And as nuclear is becoming more and more prominent, everyone's talking about it. We need to lead in that as well. So they called for that group to be put together, and they've been hard at work.
In that group, is that just the PUC? Is it different experts? Or what
we got folks from universities, researchers from universities, people that are in the energy space already, people that are in the nuclear space already, people that handle regulation and all those sorts of things. So they've been at this for over a year now, and the report was anticipated to be released in December. And it was actually released just last Monday, during the Texas Nuclear Summit.
That's right. It's November 18th.
That's right. Yep. That was a really exciting event. So the Nuclear Summit, I think, will probably be the first of hopefully an annual conference, was put on by the Texas Nuclear Alliance, which is led by Reed Clay. Reed Clay's been in Texas politics, worked for Governor Abbott, I believe, beforehand. He put together the Texas Nuclear Alliance, I think a year, maybe 2 years ago, and he's been doing, great work at bringing in all the experts and all the, stakeholders to make sure that Texas leads. So he, I was actually, that conference is on Monday. He had a welcome party on Sunday, and I was talking to him a little bit, and I had asked him, about this report. Like, do you anticipate when this is going to be released? I know we're waiting until next month, and he, told me this week. It wasn't specific, but he's thinking maybe. I'm thinking maybe this week. And luckily, while I was at that conference, I think the first hour of the conference, you saw everyone pick up their phone and start looking at it and scrolling and reading and texting, and they had released a report early. About a month early. So that was really great.
And I have to say, you gave me the heads up, and I looked so in the know because I was in a meeting like 5 minutes before it dropped, and I said, it's probably going to be today. And then sure enough, by the time the meeting ended, the guy's like, wow, how'd you know?
You're welcome.
Like, well, I can't reveal my sources.
I try to make you look good as much as I can. Well, it was great that it got released then. I think it may have distracted from that panel that was on at the moment. But luckily, the very next panel was Jimmy Glotfelty from the PUC, who led this group, and he was able to give us kind of a deep dive into how it was put together, what the recommendations are, and what it means for Texas. But that conference, Texas Nuclear Summit, was really great. I mean, I think there was about 350 people there.
Wow.
And that really, that demonstrates how much the excitement.
That's the first in
very
the
first one.
That's a big deal.
And even, again, like I said, the night before, Sunday night, we had a welcome party, a little networking thing. 7:30 on a Sunday, I think 150 people showed up.
Wow.
Which, if you do these conferences or you try putting them on like we do, that's a high number. And at the actual conference, I think something like 350 people were there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could have gotten that many people for a Texas-specific nuclear conference a year ago, or even 2 years ago. So that's how fast things have been moving, and how excited everybody is for Texas to lead on this.
So let's, our listeners, I think, understand the significance of these working groups that are assembled. I think the one thing I want to ad lib here, and then we'll get into the recommendations that the PUC has here, is the interim when there are these specific groups that are created to focus on one issue, they can produce the reports that result in subsequent legislation. So this isn't just puffery. You're not saying this is an exciting report because we're think tank nerds. This will directly influence public policy. And so there's some recommendations, which you're already seeing, if not bills filed, members expressing interest in filing bills on these recommendations. Do you want to go through what you think are some of the most consequential findings in this report?
Yeah, and just to expand what you're saying, this is what's going to spur the legislation that happens in the next session. We've both talked to lots of lawmakers that are going to be prioritizing this. And we've seen, pre-filing has started, which has been, insane. The number of bills that have been filed, but no nuclear bills have been filed yet. And talking to some of these lawmakers, especially ones kind of in the leadership of the House Nuclear Caucus, this is exactly what they're waiting on.
Sure.
They're waiting on because, in the process of drafting a bill and trying to come up with new policy, who do you talk to? You talk to the industry experts. You talk to the people in the know. And this was perfect. We get all the people in the same room for a few months, and they put out their recommendations. So we last time talked about some of the potential recommendations. I remember I mentioned that I expect there to be a lot of work on incentives, and that is the case. I'll say that 2 of the 7 recommendations they put out for the legislature do end in the word fund. Okay. So some state incentives and state funding to expand this a little bit. And both those, one of them is the Texas Nuclear Energy and Supply Chain Fund. So trying to build up kind of the industry here to build these things. One of the most exciting things about SMR, small modular reactors, is that we don't have to build them on site. We could build them in a factory. We could crank them off of an assembly line at some point and ship them to where they need to be. And in the past month, I've been doing a couple of speaking events and meeting with a lot of people in the nuclear space, and one of them being AALO Atomic. I think it's AALO Atomic. AALO Atomic. And they...
It's like, shout out to Key and Peele.
Exactly, yeah.
Aaron.
So I don't know if they're the first. They're the first that I've heard of that are actually, prioritizing this aspect of it. They've got a facility here in Austin where they're going to be, they have their own design that they're building, but they're going to be manufacturing the parts here in Austin. So whenever this enters the commercial space, they can be pumping these out very quickly.
So as a non-nuclear expert and as somebody who is not engineering small modular reactors, my immediate thought is if you're able to manufacture these SMRs not on site in terms of where it's going to end up, but at a factory, you can probably circumvent some of the regulations that make it hard to get the permitting necessary to build on a specific site. So is that potentially going to help fast track the development of advanced nuclear technology by manufacturing at an actual site?
Once you start producing, once you get up to scale on things, things become much cheaper and they become much faster. And we'll see this with the ACU project. They have their molten salt reactor that they're building, and that is a research reactor. But once they're able to fuel it and demonstrate that it works, then they can go into the commercial space. And once the designs are approved, it streamlines things significantly. It takes the timelines down significantly in the price. So I was glad to meet them at ALO and know that they're focusing on that. I'm glad somebody is. And I think there's an opportunity even, like I said, they have their own design that they're kind of, prioritizing. But whether it's them or another player that is wanting to produce and manufacture these parts and ship them out, there's going to be different designs deployed. And I think the first person, the first business to build the components that are in common to all these reactors, whether like, heat transfer parts of it or things like that. I mean, things that are the same across designs. Whoever does that first, I think, is going to be really successful. So that is one of the recommendations, is to find some incentives to bolster that a little bit, as well as Texas Nuclear Energy Fund. kind of shaped off the Texas Energy Fund that passed with a resolution last session. Texas Energy Fund, like Texas Nuclear Energy Fund, would be very low interest loans from the state to kind of jumpstart these projects.
Like the Texas Water Fund.
Exactly, yeah. So
if I'm not mistaken, I was not at this event, but I saw some of the live tweets. Representative Cody Harris had a line, and he said, Texas's nuclear fund is going to make other states look cute.
I am sorry to say, I did talk to Representative Harris a little bit there. I wasn't there. I was in a meeting during his panel. I think Senator Perry was there as well.
Oh, great. Also a great leader on this. But I guess the takeaway is that Texans lawmakers are ready to go big.
Yeah.
In investing in nuclear.
I think so. Absolutely.
Okay. So that's two of you said it was 7?
So yeah, some of the, so the ones I will, if you haven't watched the last episode, you should. I know that some of the policy recommendations that I was hoping to see, or luckily covered in here. I was very pleased and impressed with myself that happened. Right. One of them, my biggest fear, the past few months is kind of losing the momentum. So we keep saying how excited people are about this, how fired up they are to get this stuff built. I think some people or maybe they don't know the reality of this situation. They think we're going to have a really great session next year and we're going to start building reactors in 2026.
Sure.
That's not what it's going to be. I mean, we're a long way. I think on the short end, we're probably 6 years away from seeing either a research or the first commercial reactor built. Yeah. So that's been my fear, is how do we maintain this momentum and this excitement up until we actually start seeing, products put on the ground. Sure. So what we talked about last time and what we've been talking about in Life Powered is putting together, whether it's a commission or advisory committee, to continue to look into the nuclear issue here in Texas and point the legislature in the right direction, as well as figuring out what sort of, incentives or anything else that Texas can offer to keep this momentum up and keep people coming to Texas for nuclear. So that's one of the recommendations that were made, and they call it the Advanced Nuclear Energy Authority. So this is not a regulatory commission or anything like that. It's think of how I would envision it is, think of the PUC working group that's been meeting over the last year, but kind of in perpetuity, right? It's going to be energy experts, higher institutions, things like that, continuing to look at this stuff.
So this is, we didn't script this. The correlations between AI and nuclear are uncanny here because Geo hasn't filed it, but there's a draft bill on his comprehensive AI bill. TRIGA is the acronym. And one of the sections talks about an artificial intelligence sandbox. And the sandbox is going to be overseen by the Artificial Intelligence Council. And that name is still, patent pending, trademark pending there. But the point is, the AI Advisory Council was created and is about to publish its report during this interim. That will carry over in the next session. You're seeing a very similar thing happen here on nuclear. So I'm just pointing this out to say, it's encouraging because we talked momentum. We also talked thoughtfulness. It's not that there's this hasty knee-jerk, let's just throw money at it, let's not talk about it, let's not hear from folks. In AI and nuclear, we're seeing a seriousness coming together that is creating a breeding ground for good public policy and good investments. I don't know if you have any thoughts from a nuclear side.
If we do want to lead in AI or in nuclear, there needs to be a vision for it.
Yes. Yeah.
And who's the body, who's the organization that's maintaining that vision, building off of it, and making sure that there's efforts to expand on that and implement it. So that's what this kind of advisory council or commission can be.
Yeah.
And I will say there was one bill that we drafted prior that's kind of going through the whole process right now that covers that perfectly. Good. So again, very pleased that we were able to get that in the works prior to this report coming out. And it hasn't been filed or anything like that, so we'll keep names off of it for now.
See, at this rate, I want you to make additional predictions because we're going to get a running tally of, in fact, maybe we'll have Jefferson, that's a lot of work for you. We're not going to make you do that. But however many public policy predictions you made in the last one that have come to fruition in this report, at the end, I'm going to have to ask you to make 2 or 3 more.
Okay. I'll do that. I'll
including vote counts. Yeah.
Another recommendation they made that I think we mentioned last time was a permitting officer.
That's right.
So people talk a lot about some of the hurdles to nuclear. Most of them are regulatory and capital. So in Texas, we have our own agencies here. We have our own regulatory process here. It's not nearly as involved or as complex as the federal regulatory scheme there. But there is a regulatory process that everyone has to go through. Until you do it for the first time, you don't know what it is. So what we talked about last time and what's also included in this report is a permitting officer. So, just one person that knows the process, that can kind of hold your hand through it as you're going through it for the first time and streamline that just as much as possible.
Yeah. That's
so that's
great.
a good one. And another one, I think we might have included that in our bill draft. So that's a good one to go forward as well.
Well, any other, as you look at this report, you look at bills that have either been filed or seeing interest, what is Carson Clayton and Live Powered's, if you had your own Governor Abbott statement on this report, what would that be? What would that look like?
I think the report's fantastic, right? It makes lots of recommendations. It also, towards the end, it's just, other things to consider, right? Some more complex stuff to consider that weren't necessarily included in here.
Sure.
And then it makes even more, I think it even title it, complex issues to look into. And at the very
that's
end,
not daunting at all.
Yeah, no. Let me make sure I got the title right there. That's, let's see. What they don't mention, I think, is kind of my issue.
Yeah, okay.
Who's in charge of it. So complex issues to continue to explore. And lots of that has to do with nuclear fuel recycling, mining, things like that. And they do add at the very end market reform. Okay. So Live Powered, our whole issue is we want reliable, affordable energy for Texans and Americans. So all the advancements and all the excitement about nuclear, that's great. We're right on board. Here's a prediction. I think that the early adopters, the first probably handful of nuclear reactors that we see deployed in Texas, they're not going to be on the grid. They're going to be for specific customers, whether it's AI data centers or industry like what Dow's doing. But we're not going to see anytime soon any grid level nuclear generation, whether we expand existing nuclear plants or building advanced reactors specifically to power the grid. Because, like what they mentioned in here, is we need market reform. And they mentioned, I completely understand why they didn't cover it. I mean, last session we passed HB 1500, which called for lots of studies on the Texas market. And, the pod this is kind of a feeling that they have at the PUC and that I'm picking up at the Capitol as well, that people feel that the pot's been sufficiently stirred, and until the dust settles, they're really hesitant to get into it. But until we have market reform, you're not going to see any nuclear plants built in Texas for the grid, for the same reason you're not seeing any combined cycle natural gas plants. We've, mostly because of federal energy subsidies, we've had massive overinvestment in wind and solar here in Texas. And whenever you overinvest in one technology, the result is going to be you're underinvesting in another one.
Exactly.
So in our case, we've overinvested billions of dollars in wind and solar, unreliable, intermittent generation. We've underinvested in thermal generation, reliable, dispatchable natural gas, coal, and nuclear. And since we have so much wind and solar, more than any other state, we're prioritizing that. That's going on the grid first. And they are dependent on the weather, and we are holding off all the reliable generators. We're holding them to the side, holding them on the sidelines to act as backup power. And these plants, they should be baseload power, 24/7 power, and they shouldn't be acting as backup power. But that's what's happening, and we're paying, over $1 billion, lots of money a year for them to act like backup power. So that's what I would like to see is some meaningful market reform. And they throw some ideas in here about, we have an unregulated market, and maybe regulating it just for nuclear or certain price floors for nuclear power. I think it's simpler than that, With HB 1500 last session, it called for the PUC to do some studies, one of them being the reliability requirement. They're going to do a study and so it's going to say, a reliable generator is one that is able to produce this percentage of their nameplate capacity, their total capacity at these high demand times. That's a reliable generator. And if you're not a reliable generator, you're going to have some sort of penalty. Not outlined yet. So that's a good step forward. They're also doing a study on cost allocation, something we talked about a lot. The unreliable generators are imposing a cost on the Texas ratepayer, not just in reliability, but also in electricity prices. So instead of the ratepayers covering that cost, those unreliable generators that are imposing the cost on the system, they should pay it. That's another good step. If we want to attract more baseload power, whether it be natural gas or nuclear energy, in the simplest terms possible, we need to change the way that we are compensating and paying the intermittent, unreliable generators. And that could be, they're going to come out with the reliability requirement, and everyone's going to be classified as either a reliable or not a reliable generator. And once that happens, we can just say, hey, if you're an unreliable generator, we don't need to bulldoze wind turbines. We don't need to take a sledgehammer to solar panels.
That does sound cathartic,
you might want to.
Yeah.
Y'all can stick around. Y'all can still play.
Sure.
You know, you can still put power on the grid. You can still get paid for it. But we need to adjust the cap.
Yeah.
We need to lower the cap significantly for how much you're getting paid.
Right.
We cannot continue to pay unreliable intermittent sources of power as if the same way that we're paying the reliable ones.
Yeah.
And I think that signal will let everyone know, investors know, that Texas is, you know, we put value on reliability and dispatchability. We can start evening the playing fields a little bit.
Yeah. Well, okay, that was a phenomenal kind of expose, so to speak, on the reforms Life Power is pushing for next session. I want to shift to the federal discussion for a second here. Before I do, you talking about regulation made me think, I don't know if you saw that Elon Musk clip. I think it was on Joe Rogan's podcast. And I think now the running tally of consecutive shows we talked about Elon Musk is like 7. But Elon's talking about how the time it took for him to build a rocket that's going to carry a payload that's going to help colonize Mars, he was able to assemble, build out, and be ready to launch that rocket before the paperwork for approval was able to fully be submitted. And I bring that up because it's just asinine. I mean, thinking about, literally, this is a rocket that is bringing us to a different planet, and he can build that before the paperwork gets done. And now we have this person who has been red-pilled by proxy of he's a migrant coming from South Africa to America to start a dream, start a company, and he's seeing the death by 1,000 paper cuts. And now he and Vivek are heading up this Doge Commission. And there's 2 things I want to say on that. Well, 3. 1 is it's awesome. 2 is, you know, you've heard already Elon talk about some of the subsidies that have happened with Tesla that have really helped make them a key market player. And Trump has hinted at, hey, the regime of subsidizing unreliables is up, TikTok. And already Elon's coming around to that, which I think is fascinating. I was talking to an energy expert who is one of the chief architects of the energy section on Project 2025. And we were going back and forth, not knowing what Elon's going to say. I think Elon's ready to recognize we need to have more market competition with energy. The final piece is when we look at the death by 1,000 paper cuts, it really is those transformative projects, the rockets that are going to help us colonize Mars, the AI capabilities that are going to ensure that we not just contend with China but beat them, and nuclear energy. Which it's crazy that we're talking about this in 2024 heading into 25 when a lot of these technologies that are advanced were in their nascency in the 60s, just better now. So that's a preamble and my way of getting to the question, which is, do you see the next 18 months of the new administration posing any long-term benefits for the future of nuclear energy or energy broadly in Texas, if you want to go there? And if so, how?
So first, just energy overall, one of the appointments that were made recently, Chris Wright for Department of Energy, could not be more thrilled with that.
Yeah. So he has very similar talking points to you, by the way. It's
absolutely
amazing.
Very, very, very. So we're singing from the same hymnal.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And
it's a beautiful song.
And so I'm thrilled about that. And I've had the opportunity to meet Chris quite a few times.
Yep.
He's a good guy. And again, we're completely aligned. His life work has been, you know, raising people from poverty with affordable and reliable energy. That's exactly what we do here at Life Powered. So I think anything he can do to adjust some of the regulations, not just when it comes to like, when you're trying to build a power plant, there's so many things you have to take into consideration because there's all these, EPA requirements about what you're putting out in the air, if you have to have carbon scrubbers, and how often you can run and for how long, and all those things. Don't forget
the golden cheek warblers and all that.
Yes, absolutely. So all that, I think there could be there's lots of adjustments to be made so we can kind of unleash American energy again. Yeah. And build as much as we need to build without all of these unnecessary regulatory hurdles. When it comes to the Doge Committee, yes, fantastic idea. I think let's say just NRC specifically, any fat that we can trim there is more than welcome.
We should bring up, what did Vivek say about NRC? Not that I'm a single issue voter, but when Vivek came out and he said we need to blow up the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, I'm just now connecting the dots. He's heading up the Doge Commission with Elon. That could be an avenue that they're going to look into.
It's curious like what that looks like.
Right.
Do we give? There's obviously, I think, when it comes to nuclear, if for no other reason than the peace of mind of the American people, there should be some base level requirements because people are so scared of it.
Sure.
I think a few decades down the road, hopefully, another recommendation out of the PUC working group is kind of a communications campaign to educate the Texas people about how nuclear is not as scary as everyone's led you to believe.
Right.
It's quite safe. It's quite reliable.
Yeah.
So I think until that's a commonly known message and people start talking about Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island all the time, I think there should be still some sort of federal aspect on, standards for nuclear plants. But as much authority that can be shifted to the states, I welcome all of that as well. And again, even when it's just trimming fat and making things a little bit more streamlined. I've worked a few jobs before here. I know you have too. If you used to work you used to be a bag boy, right?
Courtesy clerk is the term of art.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So you push carts around, and I bet you when you worked there, you probably saw a few positions where you thought this might not need to exist, or you saw a few employees where you're like, you get one competent person, they can replace these 3 folks over here.
Right.
So if we keep the NRC around, we don't blow it up, but we kind of streamline, we make it more efficient and get rid of any fat, any unnecessary positions, any incompetent people to kind of streamline the process. That'll be very welcome. I didn't see Elon Musk on Joe Rogan this time, but I did see President-elect Trump on there talking about nuclear in general, right? And he had a great example about, you're building a concrete wall and it's, maybe an inch too long or an inch too short, and you got to tear the whole thing down. You start over again, and sometimes the permits have to start over again.
Years, long effort, billions of dollars, And that's what the most recent, traditional nuclear plant that's been built, the Vogtle plant, that was like a decade. That's the one out in Atlanta?
Yeah, I think so. It's in Georgia somewhere.
Yeah.
A decade or so. Late, a few, is it millions or billions over budget? I think
going with the B.
The original contractor, I think, maybe went bankrupt from it. But that's, if something changes slightly, the whole regulatory process has to be adjusted for it. You have to reapprove things and re-permit things. So I'm kind of streamlining those things. And I think somebody like Elon Musk, who has proven himself to be, a really efficient leader when he's doing these new exciting technological feats here, is the right person to do it.
I think that's a great point. So I'm thinking back to the first, it was the Ashley Vance biography of Elon Musk, and one of my favorite stories about him, this is before the whole cult of personality started. He's flying back from Russia after he has a meeting with some Russian business heads, and he's trying to buy old ICBMs from them so he can use them to reconvert into rockets. And the Russians practically spit at him and laughed him out of the room with the price tag that he wants to buy them for. And so Elon, he's defeated, he's flying back, and on the back of an envelope, so the story goes, or back of a napkin rather, he maps out his plan to build his own rocket rather than buy it. Just that perspective coming into energy. And I think that's where Chris Wright plays into it too, because he's a private sector guy too. He has experience in the front lines. And I think this is where it all comes back to President-elect Trump, where the way Trump is talking about that concrete that's being poured as part of the nuclear facility, he's thinking about it as a businessman. He brings up the story of, I believe it was his grandfather, who's the longest serving professor at MIT, who's in the physics department. And he's like, Donnie, someday there's going to be an explosive device that can blow up an entire city that's the size of your briefcase. But really, Trump and his whole team is looking at it like business people. And I think this is where you see the Texas miracle continues to live on, because that's the ethos that animates us. So Chris Wright, 2 thumbs up from Life Power.
3, 4, however many got in the room. I don't know how many thumbs we have in here, but they're all they're all up. Well,
okay, let's stay national on this. Another good friend of the foundation, Brooke Rollins, who is, if anyone hasn't met Brooke, she is one of the most gracious, intelligent, hard-charging, dynamic, but sweet people I have met my entire life. And I have nothing but positive things to say about her. I also, if I was China right now, I would be shaking in my boots, because Brooke will not back down to protect the interests of America above the CCP. So she's going to head up the Department of Agriculture. And she's an Aggie. And as a Longhorn, I'll still say gig 'em because to have her in the White House, it's that important. She has a background in ag. She worked as domestic policy for Trump. She used to, of course, be CEO of TBPF and really brought us to where we're at today. One of the things that she wants to focus on is keeping China out of our farmlands, but China out of our land broadly. There's energy implications for that. And I know we've kind of chatted briefly about even some of the bills that have been filed thus far, but then interim hearings in Texas about the infiltration of critical energy infrastructure by China, by Iran, by North Korea. What are y'all looking into anything as it relates to the resilience and security of our grid? Any things that our listeners should be aware of there?
So, I mean, first on Brooke, you mentioned it, not just a friend of the foundation, but former CEO and current board member, right? And just a fantastic person, a fantastic family. Couldn't be more thrilled. And people might be surprised about my interest in Department of Agriculture, but very much interested in it. If you look at the priorities of the Department of Agriculture right now, it's climate justice and racial justice and fighting back against climate change and environmental social governance, all that stuff. So getting rid of that, because we talked about this last time, we've had lots of successes here in Texas fighting back against ESG when it comes to energy. The next target is agriculture. So having her at the helm there is fantastic. When it comes, there's been lots of bills, lots of effort last session here in Texas when it comes to China purchasing land here, whether it's farmland or land that they're putting wind turbines on, often close to military bases, which is
it's funny how that works.
So
pure coincidence.
I'm very thrilled. Any adjustment she's going to be making to that. Right now I think next session it's going to be it's going to be a topic a lot of people are dealing with. We talk at Life Powered a whole lot about the reliability of the grid, making sure that the power is there when you need it. There's another aspect having a good grid, and that's the resiliency of the grid. And so not just making sure you have all the power, but making sure that the system can stand up to threats and attacks, whether that's natural disasters, whether that's cyber attacks, solar flares, EMPs, just physical attacks to the actual infrastructure. That's really important. Maybe we should talk about pre-filing for those that don't know what it is, but the lawmakers here in Texas, our session starts in January and starts in earnest in March. But we have been filing bills. They've started. I think we're probably 12th. Up to 2,000 bills or something at this point.
We're shooting this. So by the time this goes live, we're probably at 3,000, right?
We got to get into pre-filing really quickly. So again, lawmakers can file their bills before session actually starts. I remember on the first day of pre-filing, you said it was on the 12th. I was in my office and I was looking through all these bills, and I think there was about 1,100 bills filed. I left my office. I walked the 2 blocks to the Capitol to Representative Guillen's office. I had to talk to Matt, and I was talking to Matt. At that point, there had been another 150 bills filed, and he was telling me it took until I think January 10th last session. January 10th for the amount of bills to be filed that were filed on the very first day. Right. So there's quite a few that I'm tracking right now. Patterson's put out some really great bills on the grid. So has Phil King. So has Senator Sparks. Favorite bill, one of my favorite bills right now is from Representative Brian Harrison, where it's about labeling products as emission-free, saying if you cannot label a product as emission-free unless all the transportation, the packaging, everything to do with the product, up and downstream is completely emission-free. The punchline being nothing is
right. Yeah, I was going to say the label itself would require emissions to make that. That's great.
So that's a really good one. But when it comes to grid resiliency, I saw a very interesting bill filed, and it was Senate Bill 75. The author is Bob Hall, and it's about it's a kind of a study bill. It's putting together a commission to do a study due in 2026 on what are the threats to the Texas grid, whether it be physical, cyber attacks, what we just mentioned. We need to study these. We need to keep an eye on this and keep addressing it. What's really interesting about this bill is if you look at all the bills that are filed, it'll list an author. Every now and then you get 2 authors on there. This bill is authored,
especially this early. It's rare.
Later on, you'll get more people jumping in, or they'll co-sponsor. But right now, you see 1 author, maybe 2. This bill, the author is Senator Bob Hall. There are 16 co-authors. Wow. 16 co-authors on it.
So the vote's already there.
There's 17 senators listed as an author on this bill. There are 31 senators. So we can see right now this could be a major priority, that the support is already there. Right. And Representative Briscoe Cain filed a companion to it in the House. Just him. He's the only author listed on that one. But he does great work too. So that's going to be a huge priority this session. So you got to attack it from multiple angles. We'll deal with the reliability and the affordability, but obviously people are really concerned about the resiliency and the security of the grid. And Senator Hall, this has been his bread and butter for years. He's been ringing this bell for years, and I'm really pleased that he was able to, get this filed and move forward with it. And we're definitely gonna have him in here to talk about it a little bit.
Well, and that's if I may put my Chinese cyber terrorist hat on for a moment here. If I wanted to completely upend the Texas economy, there are a couple different things that I might do, but I'd start with bringing down the grid. And you've seen this in Ukraine. Russia did this, I think it was back in 2014, 2015, when political conflict was really starting to mount then. And they brought their grid offline in the winter months when it was cold. And even I think it was within 2 days, people were dying. And so you imagine what happens if our foreign adversaries use cyber terrorism to bring off the grid for not a day, not a week, but extended periods of time. And from a cybersecurity perspective, there's a whole lot that needs to be done. But I would just commend Senator Bob Hall, Representative Briscoe Cain, and the 16 other members. We need to know what the vulnerabilities are to make sure when we're working with the Trump White House, when we're working with Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor, and the Speaker on these priorities. I believe it's Senator Betancourt who says that which can be measured can be fixed. And so starting there as a baseline to make sure that China doesn't have its way by wreaking havoc on our grid is, I hope that passes unanimously.
Absolutely.
Because there's, to your point, so many reasons to support that.
The threat to Texans it's immeasurable, really. I mean, we all experienced Winter Storm Uri, right? A couple of days without power. Lots of people lost their lives. So, I mean, we think about some sort of attack. Let's say it's from a foreign hostile actor like China. Like if they shut it down right now, okay. If they wait until we have freezing temperatures and shut it down, that's a completely different thing. It wouldn't take a week for hundreds of Texans to die, because it's not just the lights, it's the heat, it's the water, your food, things like that. And we talk about this, and I think a lot of people think of hackers in China like doing really technical, sophisticated work to kind of attack them. Like it wouldn't take that.
No,
it really
it's
wouldn't.
Somebody who forgets to disable an account on an ERCOT, let's say. And simple cybersecurity vulnerability that results in infiltrating the network and bringing down every single ability to produce power in our state.
It's more vulnerable than that. Even. I mean, I'll quote Senator Phil King here. Right? I've heard him say it multiple times. So me and three of you fellas with a couple rifles can take down the grid.
Sure.
There's a few points where everything are kind of consolidated, especially when it comes, the transmission infrastructure, where it's really prone. So this bill, it's looking at all those things, and really pleased for it.
So all right, let's shift gears here into pop culture. I was informed that there's a TV show called Landman. I'm being a little facetious here, but there's a scene in this show. I'll let you describe it. And you're watching this, and Landman, it sounds like it's not just conservatives. I mean, folks on the other side of the political spectrum are flocking to this show right now. It sounds like a line that you guys would have wrote. What's this whole phenomenon happening with Landman?
It's absolutely a line we would have wrote. We probably would have changed in the vocabulary a little bit. But I saw this clip floating around, and immediately this is my new show. I started watching it last night. God bless Taylor Sheridan. I don't know if anyone goes. If you go to Paramount Network, like the streaming app, it's all Taylor Sheridan shows. He's doing a Texan doing fantastic work. But that show it's about a landman, a guy kind of a facilitator, the utility player for a big for an independent energy oil company out in Midland, Odessa. So. This scene in particular, he's talking to a young lady, an attorney who sees, hydrocarbons and our current energy sources as the thing. I think she says the thing that's going to kill us all. So he takes her over to a wind turbine and explains the amount of hydrocarbons and fossil fuels that are required to lubricate the turbine, to transport it where it needs to be, to create the concrete at the footing, to create the steel that we need for the actual podium there, and really does a great job, entertaining job, while slightly colorful language at demonstrating how energy it's wrapped up in absolutely everything we do, everything we use. I can't look at anything in this room that doesn't require fossil fuels to either maintain it, to fuel it, or to build it. So, man, good show so far.
Okay. Yeah, well, and it sounds like some good education and awareness.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to watch this. Well, this is a new segment we're going to add to the show here. We were kind of just joking beforehand, but this is too good for me not to ask. Disclosure, because we believe in AI transparency. This is using Grok, Elon Musk or X's Gen AI tool. I asked for some questions, some cheeky questions that I was going to ask an energy expert on a tech policy podcast. And the best question is, if you could make a policy into a food, what would the Green New Deal taste like?
It would taste like garbage. It tastes like absolute garbage. Can we cuss here? I will keep it. I'll keep it. We're not Billy Bob Thornton. We're not Landman. We're going to keep it clean. Okay. It would taste like crap. So here's the thing about the Green New Deal. People are still talking about it like it's hypothetical or something they want to do. They did it. It's what the IRA is. Yeah, I think even President Biden came out a few months ago and said we should have, it's about green energy. We should have called it what it was. It wasn't about, reducing inflation. But, the amount of the investments that they're making on the federal level to, so-called green energy, intermittent and unreliable energy sources, or electric vehicles and things like that is astronomical. Yeah. So that's what it is. They did the Green New Deal. They did it. And that's what, again, we were talking about the overinvestment in wind and solar here in Texas. That is because of federal energy subsidies and a lot of that coming from the IRA.
So now that we're kind of in the post-mortem phase and we're getting ready for a new presidential administration to take over, I think one of the things that history will not forget, assuming it's not Howard Zinn writing all of our history books heretofore, is the not only failure of the Biden administration on border security, but the intentional manufacturing of a crisis along the border. Did the Biden administration intentionally manufacture crises in the energy sector too? Meaning, is this going to hurt us for decades to come because of some of the bad policies they pushed that they knew were bad?
It's going to hurt us. I think we discussed some of the ways we can address it here in Texas. And I think that, the rest of the United States, the grids are a little bit different. Yeah. The states don't have as much control over their grid like we do here in Texas with our independent grid. But there are ways to fix it. I think with some of the new appointments and some of the things that are going to be happening, I think that's going to be good. I think maybe even we have some major wins here in Texas. We do exactly what we do at TPPF. We spread those to other states. I think that would be good. There's two policy issues where I don't like to get conspiratorial, but it's hard not to. Yeah. That's energy and that's the border. Yeah. Because use the border, for example. You can say all day long that, you have a bleeding heart and you want to help these people. And I understand that. I think, America should be a place where people come in legally if they want to better their lives. But after all the crimes and, the murders and everything else that we've seen from this completely unregulated, uncontrolled illegal immigration, you have to ask yourself why they're allowing it to happen. And it's hard not to get conspiratorial. And there might be schemes about making people voters and sending them to additional state or certain states and things like that. Same thing with energy. It's hard not to think that this is all about control, because if you follow out the plan of the climate alarmists and those that want to completely rid the world of fossil fuels, there is no results other than energy poverty. It's complete deindustrialization of our country and every country that follows that path. It's rationing of power. You see all these other policy proposals that go right alongside it, because it would be required if we did go off of fossil fuels. 15-minute cities. That's a big talk here. Here in Austin, there's proposals about, I don't know, anyone that's ever tried to leave via Congress Avenue, after 4:30 knows how insane the traffic is. Well, there's proposals to get rid of a lane and make a dedicated bus lane on Congress Avenue and wider bike lanes, because they want, they could say, they want everyone on buses and bikes because it's clean. Well, you need everyone on buses and bikes, because if we go through with all these proposals, you're not going to be able to drive a car. You're not going to be able to do it. We see in California, they're doing an EV mandate, all these mandates to make everybody drive it without, addressing the power needs that would require. So it's hard not to think. Often people say it that, we're the carbon they're trying to eliminate. I don't know if it's that severe or not, but it's hard not to think that it's
the basket of deplorables or the basket of carbons.
Yeah. But it's hard not to look at some of these policies and assume that either they're just horribly misinformed or it is about control.
One of the first jobs I had outside of being a courtesy clerk not bag boy, was in public affairs. And it was week 2 on the job. We were working for a natural gas client. I don't know if I've told you this. And we did a focus group, and it was it was close to the Bay Area. And we were just testing to see, hey, what do you associate carbon emissions with? And this is in California, where, to be conservative in public policy, you got to find middle ground. And so natural gas is like, man, that's bad stuff. You're pushing that in California. But this is in 2019. And within the first 10 minutes, we were asking questions about carbon emissions, this and that. There was one gal, and the way focus groups tend to go, which we were here for, there's a person that will always dominate the discussion. When that person takes over, the goal of a good moderator is to bring it back so there's more equilibrium. There's one gal that in the first 10 minutes says population growth is the problem. And I was like, okay, well, this is about to get very incendiary and spicy fast here. And then you start seeing everyone else agreeing it's population growth, And then by the end, and the moderator's trying to bring everybody back. By the end of this discussion, the only takeaway is that, I'm paraphrasing, but this is what they're advocating for, eugenics is the answer to our climate crisis. And bring it back, because I can go pretty conspiratorial real quick here. I think this, for me, was my red pilling moment when I realized that it's climate fanaticism. It is a cult. It is a religion. People worship the renewable gods as if it's their Ford from Brave New World, the orgy porgies, right? And I think where we've talked about business, we've talked about, of course, government, which is integral to the show here, but seeing that now there are solutions that those same folks, the eugenics advocates back in 2019, and conservative Alex Jones watchers who would say, hey, we can meet halfway on nuclear. That's the only, to me, encouraging thing for some of those climate cult fanaticists, because for the longest time, there hasn't been a solution we can get on board with. So knowing that, we're probably getting close on time here, what is your vision for nuclear in Texas over the next 25 years? And bring together anything you want. You talked about education, you talked about awareness, you talked about policy, you talked about innovation. But the next 20 years, what is your vision for nuclear in Texas?
I think obviously the goal being we lead on it, not just in deploying nuclear here in the state, but having the workforce, having the manufacturing capability to export these reactors to other states and to other countries, especially countries that are experiencing energy poverty. I think the initial steps will be first to, to keep up this momentum. Some of the stuff that we need to do, immediately, is on the education front. We need to not only educate the public about the safety and the reliability of nuclear energy, we need to start educating, K through 12 students and then college students. So I had an intern last summer, Ella Grace, who did a report. She did a presentation on how they teach about nuclear energy versus, the intermittent unreliable energy and the thermal reliable generation. And it's as you imagine. If there's a photo of a wind turbine and a solar panel, it's green pastures and flying birds. Right. Hopefully not too close to the wind turbine.
No. Heaven forfend.
If you show anything about natural gas or coal, there's lots, big plumes of, black smoke, not steam, which is what you would see, but black smoke. Nuclear, it's skulls and crossbones and fires and radiation and biohazards, things like that. So we need to fix that, even like for the public's awareness for the K through 12, but also follow through with another recommendation in this report is setting up, research institutes within existing universities, so we can start building out the workforce who are going to be, doing this research, designing new reactors, and the ones actually working at these sites. So that's the initial step. Again, on the workforce side, attracting industries who are going to be quintessential to building these reactors. Luckily, Texas is already set up for that. The oil and gas industry is going to be a leader in kind of translating the knowledge that we've had and that we've built here in the state to nuclear energy. A great example of that is Doug Robinson, who's leading up Natura Resources, the prime mover, I would say, behind the ACU project, the molten salt reactor that they're building. He's an oil and gas guy. That's what his career was. And after he was done with that, he switched over to this. The expertise has come with him, and not just when it comes to energy markets and things like that, but the requirements to build these things, like all that stuff. So that's going to be really capitalizing on the expertise and the experience that we have here in the state. And again, like I said earlier, make sure we don't lose momentum, making sure we keep talking about this, make sure we have a body here in the state that is continuing to prioritize nuclear, continuing to advise the legislature on what needs to happen, and getting all this stuff rolling so that we can continue not only being the energy capital of the world, but the nuclear capital of the world, and export this energy, all over the globe.
And this is something where, I don't know, I just think it's very altruistic to know that Texas can lead, and for countries like South Africa. When I was in South Africa 2 Christmases ago, and they're like, hey, by the way, we have intermittent blackouts, and it's all government controlled. And then you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and you realize that the United Nations is in cahoots with them because they're not going to give them any funding and financing for coal, or the government is getting kickbacks for shutting off energy because it creates artificial demand. There is a humanitarian component to this too, and that's something you guys have blazed a trail on.
I'll tell you, there's no better leader on that issue. No one more dedicated to eliminating energy poverty than Chris Wright. That's his
awesome.
life work. And like I said, whenever you have reliable energy in a country, with that comes prosperity. But also, what you get with energy abundance is, conservation and cleanliness and things like that. They want to think the cleanest countries, and I'm not talking about just litter. I'm talking about emissions and pollution and clean water. The ones that do the best on those issues are the ones with abundant energy sources. There's millions and millions of people on this planet right now that are burning animal excrement for heat.
Right.
But their carbon emissions are much lower than ours. What's the give and take there? There's millions and millions of women on this planet that walk 20 miles a day just to collect water. And when we talk about kind of the nefarious side of this, there's foundations that they go to these communities, and they know that these women are facing a hard time, that they walk miles just to collect their water, and it's a dangerous thing to do. And how do they address it? Well, there's lots of ways to address it. You can give them access to affordable energy. You could build a diesel generator in where they live, and pump water out. What they do instead, and I don't even want to name the foundation just in case I'm slightly wrong on this, but it's one we've heard of. They'll give them implantable birth control to counter, because they know there's going to be rapes experienced when they go on this thing every day, rather than just giving them reliable fossil fuel energy. So again, with energy abundance comes environmental stewardship, and that's what people need to realize.
Yep. And that's amen to that, bringing back the notion of conservationism versus environmentalism, and that's a bull moose party thing. That's a thing. Trump understands that, I think, viscerally too. Do you want to, in closing here, I don't think y'all had the menu or the suite of AI nuclear papers published last time you were on. Do you want to take a second to talk about what you guys published?
I think we maybe published it like a week or so afterwards, but we did The Case for Nuclear Revival. TexasPolicy.com, check it out. And what's really great about this is it's 5 separate papers that lots of people had their hands on. So huge hats off to Leah Formont, the policy analyst, as well as Brent Bennett, the policy director for Life Powered, and everyone else that contributed. Grayson McGee and then Michael Reed both wrote papers, but it's really fantastic. We got lots of great feedback. Everyone I met at the Nuclear Summit kept mentioning our paper, and it's always refreshing to realize that people are looking at your work without you having to shove it down their throat. Right. So this covers lots of different issues when it comes to advanced reactor designs, safety, what it means for energy markets, things like that. So it's kind of an all-encompassing thing when it comes to all-encompassing research when it comes to nuclear just in general. And it's we keep talking about education and how a lot of people are misinformed when it comes to nuclear. Great place to start to figure out that a lot of what you may think about nuclear is not necessarily the case. It's much safer, it's much cleaner, and it's much more reliable than people often give it credit for. Yep.
Well, amen. Well, Carson, round 2. I'd say this is successful.
We'll find an excuse to do it 3 times. I am disappointed. I think we've only brought up Chairman Capriglio
I realized that about halfway through. Yeah. Is there anything? I did bring up his bill.
You just did a panel here at the office.
That's right.
With the chairman.
What was crazy is nuclear did not get brought up. Now, granted, I was the moderator, so I think I failed our audience. Yeah, so maybe we have to do another one and get you on it. Well, but in all sincerity, Carson, great to have you on, as always. I think my leave behind for the audience, too, is we're going to continue having discussions, behind the scenes and then here on the Rebel Tech podcast, because as we get deeper and deeper into AI, I'm now knee deep in the regulatory aspect and the guardrails, what we're going to do there. But then folks like Reed Clay and others and yourself who get the energy component and how we're having data center discussions, we're having crypto discussions, but AI is taking more and more and more energy. And I think this is what I want to say is the takeaway. The countries in Western Africa, or even South Africa for that matter, that don't have access to that abundant energy, they are not just deprived of a quality of life and a health and wellness, but those countries are never going to build the next Microsoft, the next Google. And so how blessed are we to be in a state where lawmakers and leaders recognize the importance of energy as it relates to, yes, quality of life standards, yes, making sure the Texas miracle is even more miraculous every single year, but so that a rising tide can lift all boats and we can bring other countries up, because there are a lot of allies that we have that could be better allies, and by having more abundant, reliable energy, I think that's one of the greatest ways to do it. So thank you for your work. It propels what we do forward, and we'll have you on the show as many times as we can, man.
Yeah, well, any excuse to do it. And I'll leave off with anybody watching this, especially if you live in Texas. We've mentioned session is starting just right around the corner. So all the Texas residents watching, do not underestimate the power you have as a constituent. Yeah. If you agree with what we talk about on nuclear energy or with AI, do not hesitate to go down to the Capitol and make sure your voice is heard. We have open committee hearings. You can come testify. You can reach out to your lawmakers. You have a big role in this as well. So not just watching programs like this or seeing what we have going on at Texas Public Policy Foundation. Lots of ways for you to get involved, and please do so.
Yep. Amen. Well, TexasPolicy.com, as always. Check out Carson Clayton, all their research with Life Powered. More to come on nuclear, more to come on tech. And as always, we'll see you next time on Rebel Tech.